Theresa May's government feels the sting of defeat once again in the House of Lords over her Brexit plans. The upper chamber of the British Parliament has voted to keep EU environmental standards after the UK leaves. Now, the amendment was opposed by the Prime Minister. The peers have already defeated the government on 14 previous amendments. Here in Britain, the Daily Mail has criticised the House of Lords getting in the way of Brexit. In the past, it's called peers like Lord Billy Moria unelected wreckers, and there you see him in that picture. Lord Billy Moria joins me. Your Lordship, are you a wrecker, undemocratic?
Well, that's what they've said. I see that I'm trying to protect our democracy, and I'm trying to make sure that this European Union withdrawal bill, along with my peers, we've done our job, which is to scrutinise legislation, to review legislation, amend it, and get the Commons to think again. At the end of the day, the Commons gets the final say. All we can do is make them think again.
But you are putting forward views that some would say go against the tenet that the British people voted for, which is to leave the European Union. And if you try and wheedle it so that you remain in the customs union or the single market, you de facto nullify that vote.
Not at all. The British people voted on a very narrow basis, 52-48, nearly 2 years ago now, to leave the European Union. But they didn't say on what basis. It wasn't a blank check to say...
Well, it was, actually, because that was where the referendum was put.
Well, that is not the way. If we leave, we will leave, because we have to go to the people at some stage and say, these are the terms of deal or no deal. Are you happy to leave on that basis? And this EU withdrawal bill, there were so many amendments. We had over 400 amendments. What we're talking about is the 15 where the House of Lords defeated the government. And by the way, defeated the government with Labour peers disobeying their whip, with Conservative peers up to 17 to 19 each time, including former cabinet ministers and ministers defying their whip, because peers doing what they thought was the right thing to do for the best of the country. So the customs union, for example, that is one of the best solutions to the Northern Ireland situation. Then the EEA amendment to say, well, the least worst option, the best is to stay in the EU, but if we have to leave, the EEA is the least worst, because that gives us all the single market terms, the freedom of movement, goods, services, capital, which is fantastic for British business.
So where do you see the limits of your authority to question not just the decision of what the British people voted for, because let's face it, given your druthers, you'd have a stay in the European Union.
Without a doubt, right. That is the best option.
Right, but it's not going to happen because that's not what the British people voted for.
Not necessarily, because the way this is all evolving, the Conservative Party itself cannot agree on what form of customs partnership, or customs max FAC, none of which is acceptable to Ireland or to the EU or is practically workable from a business point of view, let alone when you get to the Gibraltar situation, which hasn't even come up yet. The Northern Ireland is an Achilles heel. At the end of the day, this is all going to now go back to the Commons. It is up to them whether they accept these. And for example, another big amendment was Parliament having a meaningful say at the end of the day in October. So the government's view of a meaningful say was, well, here's a deal or no deal. If you vote it down, we crash out on WTO rules. The British public will not accept that. We in the House of Lords said a meaningful say means, if necessary, go back and negotiate
but
again.
You can't.
Or if,
but time's out.
Maybe remain. Or maybe people having another say.
You're doing exactly what the critics say. You are forcing the argument into a narrow alleyway that eventually ends up with you just said it then, Your Lordship, or we remain.
Yes, that is quite possible that we might end up remaining. That might be the best option, that the British people themselves say that's what we prefer.
Last night, sitting where you are, the father of the house, Kenneth Clarke, who you'll know very well, have a listen to what he said. Have a listen to what he said, because I'd like to have your views on what Mr. Clarke said.
I've never seen anything as chaotic as this. No, this is the maddest political situation I've ever seen. What worries me, this is one of the most important crises in British politics of modern times. We're taking decisions that make a big effect on the prosperity and well-being of my children and grandchildren.
Now, you sit as a crossbencher, which means you have no party political affiliation in the Lords. Would you agree with Kenneth Clarke?
I would agree 100% with what he said, because if you look at the Conservative Party, they're absolutely split on this. If you look at the Labour Party, they can't agree whether to stay in the single market or not, whether the EEA is an option or not. So you've got the main government party in a disarray, you've got the opposition in disarray, and the most important point he made there is this is the future of our children and grandchildren. And already we've got 2 years worth of them who didn't get a vote in 2016 or old enough to vote now. By the time we get to March, there'll be over 2 million youngsters. And every time I speak to youngsters at schools and universities and I say, would you prefer to remain in the European Union? 100% of their hands go up. It's their future that we're taking away from them.
As always, Lordship, good to see you, sir. Whether you're wrecking or not, please always come back here and send the wrecking ball around. Thank you very much. Now, when